I now get to introduce Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. I like Lindsey Graham. He took the pledge not to raise taxes, and he kept his word. He has repeatedly fought for limited government, fought against overspending, and been a serious leader of conservative principles in Washington, D.C., and he wins elections and gets reelected and reelected and reelected. I am a little bit tired of people who get all the answers right on the test and forget to get reelected. There is very little virtue in knowing all the answers if you don't actually get elected to the House or the Senate or the governorship or the presidency and be able to enact the principles and defend and support the principles that one holds. I saw Lindsey Graham yesterday at the White House when the president was talking about your leadership on the Kavanaugh fight. I'm reminded of Clarence Thomas's moment of clarity, and where he sort of redirected a glacier that was moving against him and turned it around when he talked about the high-tech lynching, and everybody listening knew it was true. And Senator, you did the same thing when you stood up to some of the most ridiculous attacks on Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, and that was a good, important part of winning that fight. I think it's nice to be right on all the key issues. I think it's important to get reelected. I think it's important to win the fights we fight. And Lindsey Graham has done all three. This is important. I recommend it to other people who might want to be congressmen or senators or presidents. Lindsey Graham.
Thank you all very, very much. The more you drink, the better this will sound, so. When Grover called me and asked me to come and speak, I enthusiastically said yes, because 5 years ago, I don't think you would have had me. Do you agree with that? I'm amazingly consistent, but it's just hard to understand it. Speaking of Trump, he asked me if we could do something about this emolument clause. I said, I'm on it. So Jared called while I was sitting with Grover, and he said, you were the first group to come out for President Trump. I don't know what you saw, but you saw something I didn't. You were right, and I was wrong. So congratulations to the American Spectator community. President Trump and I got off to a rocky start. I was one of the 16 people he beat running for president. And if you don't remember me running for president, it's really not your fault. It didn't last that long. But now I'm going back to Iowa this weekend, and there'll actually be some people there, so I'm excited about that. But the campaign, the primary was tough. Just look what he did. I mean, take me out of it. He beat some really talented conservative icons. He beat the Bush family. That's no easy thing, right? Then he beats the Clinton machine. There are people at the bottom of lakes in Arkansas trying to beat the Clinton machine. This is no easy thing to do. I've been on the receiving end of the Clinton machine. Every 20 years, we tend to impeach people, whether we need to or not. So After the election, he called me over to the office, the Oval Office, and he said, you know, I'd like for you to help me. I said, you beat me like a drum. He loved that part. And I said, I want you to be the best president we've ever had, and I sincerely mean that. And he said, I don't have your phone number. And I said, there's a reason for that. If I'd done as well as my phone number, it might have been a different outcome. But people ask me about how we started and where we are today. How did this happen with you and President Trump, Grover? Well, let me tell you. I've come to like him, and he likes him, and that gives us a lot to talk about. That gets us through 18 holes pretty quickly. So this whole Civil War thing, tried that at home, don't go down that road, didn't turn out well. What I've come to learn about President Trump is judge him by the results. I don't get caught up in the drama of the day, right? What have I learned? He goes to bed late, he gets up early, and he calls a lot, and I really appreciate that. But when you step back and look at all the crap this guy goes through every day, it's amazing, isn't it? From the time he goes to bed to the time he gets up, it's just anything and everything. And the Democrats have driven me in his camp as much as anybody else. After a while, you say enough already, right? So he won the election. Remember the three-legged stool of Ronald Reagan? Fiscal conservatism, social conservatism, strong national security. I try to explain Trump this way. What would happen if Ronald Reagan and P.T. Barnum met? It would be Donald Trump. So the reason you invited me here tonight is because I am funny. And we change senators every 50 years in South Carolina, whether we need to or not. But it's Kavanaugh, don't you think? If I said what was on your mind, I'm glad. It was harder to be in person than it was to watch on TV. Weren't you ready to blow up and say, will somebody please say something? So let me tell you why it mattered that I said something. And the only reason anybody listened to what I had to say is because I voted for Sotomayor and Kagan. If I hadn't voted for them, I don't think anybody would give a damn what I said. It gave me the ability to look every one of them in the eye and say, I would not have done that. I was raised better than this. I've known Brett. How many of you know Brett Kavanaugh? If I thought drinking beer would make you that smart, I would have drunk more beer. He's lived an incredibly dedicated life. He's worked his butt off. He's been successful at everything he chose to throw himself into. He's got a wonderful wife. Ashley, I know her. And if you know Brett Kavanaugh, and I've known him for 20 years, here's what I've learned. You're not Bill Cosby in high school and all of a sudden become Brett Kavanaugh. This whole thing just blew my mind. I'm sitting in the United States Senate confirming, about to vote on somebody to become a member of the Supreme Court, and we're talking about a high school annual. A party that happened 30 years ago, but nobody could remember where it was and who was there and how they got there. But it didn't matter. The accusation was self-proving. I sat there and I listened and I listened and I listened to the point that I couldn't take it anymore. And what got me over the edge is when they turned to him and said, if you're truly innocent and you got nothing to hide, Ben, why don't you ask to extend this investigation? Can you imagine how that would go over with his daughters? How many of you been through one background check? How many of you been to a proctologist? He's gone through 6. So what does this all mean? It's not about Trump. It's about us. Brett Kavanaugh was the Bush guy. I told the Democrats when he picked Brett, you should be happy. I thought he'd pick Judge Judy. You never know. You don't even have to be a judge. I said he picked an actual judge. How many of you believe that any Republican would have Brett Kavanaugh on their list? He was the top of anybody's list, right? He was President Bush's private secretary, which means he saw every document going across President Bush's desk. He was the Bush guy. And President Trump chose Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, 2 people that any Republican president would have on their top list. I recommended 3 people to the president for the Supreme Court. He's picked 2 of the 3. I'm not going to tell you who the third was. We'll see how that turns out. So what I want you to understand, this is about Trump, but it's really not. It's about us as conservatives. They hate what we love. This is why you matter. In their world, a judge is an extension of politics. If you lose at the ballot box, your backup plan is the court. In our world, is somebody to resolve disputes that are well-defined and limited in nature. Why is it always our people? Thomas, Bork, Alito, now Kavanaugh. Their goal is to keep as many of these seats open as long as they can and fill them with liberals, and they don't give a damn what they have to do to get there. And if I spoke for you, I'm pleased. What I said that day, I really meant. And I do work across the aisle. I did vote for their judges because I thought they were qualified, even though I would not have picked them. So we're about, a couple of weeks away from Thanksgiving? I've never been more thankful to be an American than I am right now. Right? And I've never been more worried about my country than I am right now. Right? So, you know why we're going to win in 2020? Because we can't afford to lose. So, Mitch McConnell has had a vision to put as many judges on the court as possible. I had no idea we had this many judges. Every town in America must have a judge. We're going to have about 30% of the federal judiciary appointed by Donald Trump by the end of this year. Imagine 4 more years. Grover has been pretty agnostic about tax cuts, but I think you like them. It's no accident that the economy is strong. Our policies work. And what I'm most pleased with is that they work for people who traditionally don't vote for us. And I know this sounds really weird. Vote for Donald Trump, he's the most stable choice. He's not going to wake up one day and turn our country into a communist socialist state. Now, he'll have a wild ride with the president, which is kind of fun. Every day with Trump is Christmas, right? One day it's a good shotgun, the next day it's a sweater, not so much. But there's something under that tree every day. On the policy side, folks, he is Ronald Reagan. How many of you are veterans? God bless you all. I would say this. The military is as strong today as I've seen it. And I spent 33 years in the Air Force. In 3 years, we've undone the damage that Obama did in 8 years. And what have I learned? If I had 8 years to live, I would want to live during the Obama presidency because it seemed like forever. Like, when the hell is this guy leaving? So what have we learned? After $25 billion, 60 FBI agents, 2,500 subpoenas, and a partridge in a pear tree, Donald Trump didn't collude with the Russians. What makes you think he's colluding with the Russians if he ain't colluding with his own government? This collusion thing ain't gonna stick to him. He's a disruptor. And he's given hope to a lot of people who believed that nobody up here cared about them. Conservatism, for it to matter, people have to believe it's good for them. And the American Spectator, in a high-minded way, explains the benefits of our policies, but Donald Trump has proved that the policies work better than any article Ben will ever write. The truth of the matter is that what you advocate actually works. That if you do cut taxes and lower the cost of government, people will respond in kind. If you don't have a job in South Carolina today and you're able-bodied, you don't want a job. So I just want to end with this, that this election is going to be the election from hell. They're going to throw everything but the kitchen sink at the president, and here's why he's going to win. Remember when he asked the question, what do you have to lose? And that was directed at African Americans, but he needs to ask that same question to the country as a whole. What do you have to lose if I lose? A lot. Your taxes go up, the government gets bigger, and the military gets weaker, and our enemies get stronger. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that most Americans will believe that if Donald Trump loses, they lose. And just remember what happens to our country if this other side wins the day. Everything about the country we've come to appreciate and know literally goes away. Free enterprise dies. Do you agree? It dies. I'm the first in my family to ever go to college. I grew up in the back of a liquor store, a beer joint, and a pool room. Neither one of my parents finished high school. That's not a socialist story. That's an American story. So, I'm going to do everything I can to help this president, including telling him when I think he's wrong, wanting him to win. Does that make sense? It's okay to criticize the president if you want him to be successful. And I think he believes that I want him to be successful. Unlike President Obama, President Trump will do one thing that I could never get Obama to do: change his mind. And the most dangerous thing in the White House is somebody who will not change their mind. This president will listen to you. Baghdadi's dead today for a reason. I don't care if it's guarding the oil, as long as ISIS doesn't come back. That's good for all of us, don't you think? So the one thing I like about the president is that he understands the world for what it is and who we're dealing with. He got out of the Iranian agreement because it sucked. Growing up in the back of a liquor store, what did I learn? If somebody's threatening to cut your throat, don't buy them a knife. We gave the Ayatollah $150 billion, and everybody's shocked he didn't build hospitals, roads, and schools with it. So getting out of the Iran agreement, unleashing the military to destroy the caliphate, all goes back to the instincts that President Trump has. He instinctively understands that there's some people you just can't deal with. You have to be tough. So, what does all this mean? It means that if we can pull this off and have 4 more years of free enterprise, reforming the tax code, lowering the cost of business, shrinking the size of the government, and filling up the judiciary for 50 years, then the least among us will have a better life. I don't know if I deserve this recognition, but I know I don't deserve half the crap I get. Grover, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for tolerating how difficult I can be sometimes if you're a conservative. But understand this, there's always a method to the madness. Because in 2050, a majority of this country will be non-Caucasian. And I'm hell-bent on growing this party. And the way you grow this party is that you sell conservatism. The way you grow this party is you have more Tim Scotts, not less. Thank you for the recognition, and the only way I know to pay you back is to make sure we don't turn our country over to a bunch of socialists. Thank you very much.
Senator Lindsey Graham, thank you for everything.